The 90s were a glorious time for new game franchises. The Super Nintendo was awesome, the PlayStation opened the floodgates for all kinds of new games and new studios, and PC gaming was leagues ahead of consoles. So then how come there were so many new games that were definitely supposed to be long-running franchises that went nowhere? These are games that were overhyped or over-advertised. Maybe they had grander plans with all kinds of other media tie-ins, or maybe they were great but never got a sequel for some reason. Either way, these are games that were definitely meant to be huge franchises that fell flat on their faces. I'll go ahead and get all of these out of the way in just one big lump. Pretty much every single Mascot platformer one-off. Each one of them trying so hard to be the next Mario or Sonic. For each one they got a handful of games like Bubsy or Arrow the Acrobat. There were two that completely failed. Rocky Rodent, Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel, Awesome Possum, Radical Rex, Booger Man, Glover. Several of these even had cartoons and toys all planned for it. There are far too many to go through all of these individually, so just know we're counting every single one of those Mascot games.
Diddy Kong Racing!
Diddy Kong Racing rules! This is probably still the best kart racer ever made. Speed boosts, items to grab and power up, a bunch of fun, colorful characters. It expands on everything by having airplanes and hovercrafts, several different multiplayer game modes, and a whole single-player campaign that is filled with secrets and challenges. And you can do it in two-player co-op. Most people agree that Diddy Kong Racing holds up better today than Mario Kart 64 ever did. So why wasn't there ever a Diddy Kong Racing 2? It was the Nintendo 64's 8th best-selling game of all time. It would have been so easy to make another one and keep it going with even more fresh ideas. And to be fair, they did try to do just that. Anyone remember Donkey Kong Racing? It was shown before the Nintendo GameCube's release and was Rare's follow-up to their own game. It was a racing game where you would use animals as your vehicle. It had a familiar logo and it reused the Taj the Elephant character. But when Microsoft bought out Rare, that game ceased to exist. But that wasn't the only one. There was also Diddy Kong Pilot, a Game Boy Advance game that uses only the planes and leans more into the Donkey Kong universe. But it got transformed into Banjo Pilot, which actually did see release. The tragedy is that Diddy Kong Pilot was basically complete and ready to ship, only to be shelved because of character licensing. But it doesn't end there. There was also going to be a full-fledged sequel titled Diddy Kong Racing Adventure for the Nintendo GameCube. The developer Climax Studios made a prototype and pitched it to Nintendo, who said no. The closest thing it ever got was Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, which is a Donkey Kong racing game, but it basically has nothing to do with Diddy Kong Racing. It seemed to only exist so that there's another game that uses the Donkey Konga barrel controller. So sadly, Diddy Kong Racing never got to be its own worthy series, despite numerous attempts to do so. The most we ended up getting was a port of the game onto the Nintendo DS, but with altered music, removing Banjo and Conquer, and forcing in some touchscreen controls. I didn't like it nearly as much as the N64 original, which is too bad because that is a game that's worthy of continuing on to this day. Or for God's sake, at least put it on the virtual console with online multiplayer. And hey, if you're getting a hankering to wanting to own some of these games again, what better way to do it than this video's sponsor, Encore. Encore is the all-new spot to search for collectibles like toys, cards, and yes, of course, video games. When you're shopping on Encore, real collectors tell you about what you're selling, and best of all, it can use video clips in the postings. It's a great way to make sure you're getting the right thing, and for old video games, you're getting one that still works. Imagine if TikTok was combined with an online auction site, and you got Encore, a more reliable, easier way to shop for old collectibles. Here's some sample listings here. You can easily swipe to add your bid, or even save auctions so that you get notified when there's only 5 minutes left in case you want to aggressively go for it right at the end. Encore protects you by making all sellers be ID verified, so you won't have to worry about when your item arrives not as described. This is in addition to the video postings, so say goodbye to stock photos, ambiguous or deceptive descriptions, and uncertain purchases. Now's a great time to sign up since, looky here, they're doing a ton of giveaways. They're free to enter, and if you win one, Encore will pay for shipping, so it costs you nothing. If all of this sounds good, use my link in the description below to download the app on iOS and Android app stores. Or you can scan this handy dandy QR code on your screen right here. Start browsing game listings and be sure to sign up for more of those giveaways. Thank you to Encore for sponsoring this video, which we'll get back to now. Rise of the Robots was one of the most hyped up, incredible looking, industry-changing events all the way up to its release. This is one of those times where it's easiest to say you had to be there. It's a one-on-one fighting game featuring robots, 3D rendered graphics, non-existent movesets, piss-poor controls, and mind-numbingly dull gameplay. It was published by Time Warner Interactive for almost every single platform imaginable, and they wanted it to be big, like real big. Like, throw away your copies of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter because those are baby games for babies compared to Rise of the Robots. Advertising for it was absolutely everywhere. Tons of previews in every gaming magazine. EGM, Nintendo Power, Edge magazine. It was shown off at the Consumer Electronics Show in 1993. Every single preview all said the same thing. Incredible graphics like never seen before. And quote, unprecedented AI that would learn and counter players. Trailers also stated that there would be full 3D movement in arenas inspired by VR. And of course the game sucked. Like, sucked really bad. Review scores as low as 2 out of 10 or 5% out of 100. Slow, awkward movement, and only one character you can play as when doing single player. Besides the game features already mentioned, they touted how the game would have music from Brian May, as in Brian May from the little band called Queen, which would end up being about 5 seconds of guitar in only one song. Before the game came out, they published a Rise of the Robots novel to elevate the lore, I guess. Preview events were also used to flaunt that they were already setting up comic books, a cartoon show, toys, and even possibly a feature film, and advertisements. So many advertisements. By the time the game finally came out after numerous delays, it was up against several other new fighting games like Killer Instinct and Tekken. Somehow, despite failing in every facet imaginable, they still made a sequel for PlayStation and Sega Saturn called Rise 2 Resurrection, which is somehow even worse and even less people played and even less people knew it existed. Like, did you even know there was another one? It's a prime example of forcing hype and excitement, claiming to be the next big thing and under-delivering on everything. It was meant to be huge, and it was a huge steaming pile of shit. Metal Gear Solid is one of the biggest and one of the best titles on the PlayStation. It was one of those system-defining games that pushed the industry forward, and Nintendo 64 owners were left wondering when they could get something like that. Enter Hybrid Heaven. The game itself is hard to explain. It's an adventure game with exploration elements, kind of like Tomb Raider, complete with puzzle solving. You can pull out this weak little plasma pistol thingy to defeat some defense drones, but the combat is a one-on-one fighting game like Throwdown with wrestling moves. But it's also a turn-based RPG as you level up maneuvers, favorite attacks, and different parts of your body. It's weird. It's not awful. This was one of those games I bought as a kid and remember thinking, it's all right. I never beat it though because I got stuck on one fight with a robot that I just couldn't get past. However, the reason why I bought it was because, simply put, it was promoted as the N64's answer to Metal Gear Solid. Look at this dude even kind of resembles Solid Snake. It had cinematic cutscenes, even with some voice acting, promising deep, mature themes and characters. That you wrestle? I'm not sure if it was the publisher that ran with the idea that it was better than Metal Gear, or if things like Nintendo Power did it because they were desperate for any game that could be perceived as remotely older or cooler than Metal Gear. But ran with it they did. It got tons of magazine ads, previews, and was the cover of a Nintendo Power issue. In fact, it was probably this very issue of Nintendo Power that tricked me into buying it in the first place. The game isn't bad, but it isn't spectacular either. It only ended up selling something like 200,000 copies, which again isn't terrible, but is nowhere near Metal Gear Solid's 7 million. So what company had the brazen balls to go up against Konami's sales juggernaut? Turns out, also Konami. They tried to make their own competition and failed at that, leaving them without an action franchise for Nintendo platforms. Here it comes! Low-hanging fruit? Yeah, probably, but it's also the most well-known example of a game that tried too hard. Daikatana was going to be the first-person shooter that made all other FPSs look like Noah's Ark 3D. It wasn't coming from just any other studio. It was the first all-new game from legendary developer John Romero after he put out bangers like Wolfenstein, Doom, and Quake. He made his own studio, and this was his first game from it. The game itself is not great. It's basically another shooter with a lot of time travel, 2 crappy AI companions that fail the level if they die, and really uninspired level design. Technically I'm stretching this because Daikatana finally released in early 2000 only after numerous delays, but it was hyped up to be a thing starting in 1997. The most infamous magazine advertisement alone showed the hubris of the project. John Romero's about to make you his bitch, suck it down. And of course it also got a tie-in comic book because it was in the 90s and that was the style at the time. It wasn't just going to be a new game, it was going to be the game. It was as if any gamer who took on Daikatana had some sort of unspoken cred and skill level beyond every other gamer in the world, or basically what Dark Souls players think they have. The hype didn't start to dwindle until the game was actually being shown at places like E3, where it looked horrendous with low frame rates and technical issues. When it began development, they were hoping to sell about 175,000 copies. As the excitement built, they then said they would sell 2.5 million units. Within 6 months of the release, Daikatana sold 40,000. That's it. Perhaps if it was a decent enough game, we could have seen sequels or even an HD remastered these days. All the focus was put on John Romero's involvement, instead of the quality of the game itself. Secret of Mana is widely considered to be one of the best RPGs on the Super Nintendo, and Secret of Evermore has absolutely nothing to do with that series. It wasn't a replacement, a substitute, or a spin-off. Evermore did borrow several gameplay elements from Secret of Mana because it worked well and the game sold a bunch. So Square issued a task to the newly formed American development branch Squaresoft USA. Make a new action RPG that's like Secret of Mana but isn't. Copy their homework but just change it a little bit. They did their best, and their best was considered surprisingly solid. A familiar combat system and inventory management through those ring menus, only some new spice with the alchemy magic, and writing that was very distinctly American. So why weren't they allowed to make another one? Well, according to lead programmer Brian Fadrau, after it released, there was talk of doing a sequel right away that got shut down by Square, and the team was split apart. I have no idea how well the game sold, but the imagery it invoked was striking. Seriously, who doesn't see the main character standing defiantly against the giant red bug thing and think, oh man, this looks awesome? Many reviews at the time said the same thing about it. The game is decent, with some problems, but is a very promising start for a fresh development team. They should have gotten another shot at making something truly great. And ever since then, Square Enix has let themselves forget that Secret of Evermore even exists. The Nintendo 64 only has like 5 RPGs, and one of the most well-known ones is Quest 64. I've already spoken about that one before, but basically it's just kind of fine. It's not particularly awful, but also wasn't so great that it really established itself. Still, it did get spin-offs. There are 2 Quest Game Boy games, but we're not talking about Quest 64. After the game failed to ignite the N64 fanbase, the same publisher, THQ, came back with another RPG, Aiden Chronicles: The First Mage. Aiden? Whatever. Their promise was simple. They're gonna make a darker, more serious, more hardcore RPG for Nintendo fans. That's exactly how it was hyped up. Magazine articles would describe the opening 15 minutes and boldly state, that alone lets you know this is going to be better than Quest 64. The game is terrible, like really bad. I would much rather play Quest 64. Naturally, THQ had big plans for it. After all, it had the naming scheme of Game Name Subtitle, implying that there would be more Aiden Chronicles with different subtitles and exploring whatever world they had. It got nowhere near those ambitions. For the most part, people have entirely forgotten that this is a game that even exists. And yeah, this was another one I bought as a kid, because I was desperate for N64 RPGs. Alright, I know I'm stretching the rules a bit here since this one came out in early 2000, but come on, hear me out. Legend of Dragoon is a late-era PlayStation 1 RPG with a lot of innovative mechanics. It's got great PS1 graphics, great music, and classic turn-based battles. Only during battles, whenever you make any kind of melee attack, you do a sequence of timed button presses to perform a combo attack, each one ending with the character charmingly shouting the name of the attack.
Burning rush. Spinning cane. Whip smack.
That alone made the game awesome to play. Along with turning into Dragoon forms and a decent story, it still holds up today and is great to go back to replay. Ask anyone who's played Legend of Dragoon and they all say the same thing. I love it. It's so good and love going back to it. So why was there never a sequel of any kind? It sold over 1 million copies, which seems pretty good to me, especially for the era. In a world of Final Fantasies and those trying to copy it, Legend of Dragoon was the best copycat of them all. It's not like the world has forgotten about it. Remember when it was added as a downloadable game on the PlayStation Network like 13 years ago? It sold great on there too. Legend of Dragoon has something of a legacy. If y'all would recall, the Sony Smash Bros. Clone for PS3, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, which is not entirely All-Stars, nor is it a Battle Royale game. It had a lot of its DLC canceled early on. One of those DLC characters? That's right, Dart from Legend of Dragoon. And if that isn't enough, more recently, he was one of the hidden cameo bots in 2024's Game of the Year, Astrobot. Look, he even makes the same damage numbers pop up. That's fun. It wasn't trying to be overly ambitious, it wasn't overhyped, it didn't overshoot itself from executives and producers meddling in. It was just a really good game. Of all the games I talked about in this video, Legend of Dragoon deserved to be a long-running franchise the most. I know there's more of them out there, but what other games in the 90s do you remember trying to be a big deal franchise starter? Let us know in the comments, especially if it's games that never got sequels, re-releases, or had those cliffhanger endings that went nowhere. And once again, thank you to Encore for sponsoring this video. Use my link in the description to get started and help support the channel.